started going to grad school, a gentleman by the name of Daniel Johnston, who is in Seagrove, North Carolina, who was an apprentice of Mark Hewitt, who was an apprentice of Michael Cardew, who was an apprentice of Bernard Leach, if you know some of your potters. I might be boring you guys. But anyway, Daniel came down and did the same workshop that I'm about to do for you guys. And I was the work study. I rolled coils for him, I did everything for him, we got into a good rapport. And I didn't know, I was thinking I wanted to teach, because teaching, you've always got money and you've always got access to a studio. You don't have to like sell your art. But I also wanted to kind of maybe see if I wanted to go and do production pottery as a living and kind of set that up. He invited me to come out over a summer. He had just, I guess 3 years before, just gotten done with his apprenticeship with Mark Hewitt and had gone to Thailand and come back, learned this skill set of making these large pots. And he was like, I'm thinking about taking on an apprentice, but I'm not set up. Would you like to come out and work with me over the summer? I'm like, sure, I'd love to do it. I could figure out if I want to do production pottery. I get out there, the first thing I start doing is taking care of the horses, cleaning the chicken cage, and building the house that I was going to live in. So it was total Mr. Miyagi, wax on, wax off, kind of Karate Kid kind of thing. And then we got into making. I had no desire to make big pots. I was really into functional work. Like I said, I'm ADD, I'm fidgety. I like making tools. I like making simple farmware, kind of nice, beautiful forms. All of you guys have an aesthetic that you've built up since you were a little kid and you broke your first coffee cup. You know what a plate is. You know what a bowl is. You have your favorite tool. That kind of stuff. I was the same way. He was like, bada, 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 you can make some stuff, but you need to throw these forms for me. We're going to do glaze tests. And he was setting me up kind of as the beginning of an apprentice. And at the end, he was like, okay, now I'm going to do my big pot run. He's got a kiln. It's a wood-fired kiln, and it's easily as long as this room is.
Wow.
8-foot door. During my talk, I'll show you some images of the kiln and all that kind of stuff. He's got it so large so that he can do small work and functional work and then do his big pots. And he's like, I'm going to do some big pots. Would you like to do one next to me just to learn how to do it? I did it. And again, come to clay moment. I loved it. It was great. I have that like kind of hatred for large work because it's kind of like the dude in the big truck driving down the road, right? And I'm not into it, but it's a really good way to kind of develop these monolithic kind of things. And I love boulders and going out in the desert and these like big rocks and stuff. And that's what I started doing with this and fell in love with it. So what I'm going to be doing is explaining some of my clay. I've got my clay recipe here. I make all my own clay. In regards to making large forms, these are all high fired, but the clay body is different than the smaller pot clay body. You need to have more grog in it, more large particles, and you need varying size of particles, but those large grog pieces that are in the clay stops the pot from cracking and having this problem during thermal expansion and all this kind of stuff. I don't want to get too sciencey for you because this is some of y'all's Ceramics 1 class. But as clay's going through quartz inversion, there's some problems, some things that can go on, and it's shivering and shaking, and then it becomes fluid. And then when it comes back down, it's all fluid, and then it's got to get tight, and it might try to crack on you. In your larger forms, I'm sure you guys have gotten S-cracks. In your large forms, you've really got to be careful with that because you put a lot of effort in. It takes me a day to make a form, and then a day to decorate it, and then 2 weeks to dry it, and then I spray glaze it, and 2 or 3 days in the kiln. I don't want to lose that work. I don't care about losing 25% of my small work because I've got 150 pieces in there. If I lose 25, I'm okay. So you don't want to lose the big stuff. So I'm really kind of still fine-tuning my clay body. I put Hawthorne Bond in it, which is just a normal fire clay. I do 2 parts fire clay, 1 part ball clay for my recipe. I think you guys do 50-50, which works just as well. I just want my clay to be a little more fire clay and a little harder. I take mine up to about cone 11, and Daniel took his stuff up in a wood fire kiln to about cone 13. So same with this, 2 parts fire clay, but instead of just using Hawthorne Bond and ball clay, 1 part ball clay, I'm using Gold Art, EPK, Tile 6 kaolin, Newman's clay, which is red art, Gold Art. All of these different kinds of clay, because my thought is, since it's such a large piece, if you have all of these different clays that are at different sizes, that clay body's going to be a little bit more, I don't know, a little bit able to go through all of that quartz inversion. I also put a bunch of mullite in. So if anybody wants to copy this down, if you want to get into big pot forms, or if you want to make big, thick brick tiles or large platters, this is a really good recipe that I've found. You're welcome to go through that. I've got some tools over here. I told you guys I'm a maker, so I like to make all of my own tools. This is the tool that I made when I went to Daniels, and this is my remake out of Mesquite. This is made 50, this is going to be the 53rd big pot I've made, and you can see it used to be flat and straight. Okay, don't ever throw the tool away. This gives me nice curves. It's not what I want to start off with because I've ground it down. This is what I want to start off with, but if you want to copy any of the tools and the shapes down, you're welcome to just kind of trace them and do that kind of stuff. I think this was bought at Lowe's, and it's mahogany or something, one of their little expensive kind of pieces. And then I had a buddy in Alpine that was gotten a whole bunch of like mesquite planks that he had saved from doing a floor. Somebody had a really expensive floor done, and then I made this, and this is nice and hard, and it's heavy, and hopefully it'll stay a little flatter than that. So I've made my coils, and I'll show you guys how to make coils. I don't do a lot of wedging. Obviously I can't put this through our pug mill because it's got a lot of dark clay in it, and we use a lighter clay body. So I don't hug any of my big pot clay. I don't spend a lot of time wedging my coils. The bottom of the piece that I'm going to put down, the floor, I do spend time wedging so that that clay is, like she was saying, all kind of ready and situated and set up. You guys know that clay is like little particles, and if you don't wedge, all those clay particles are all sweat. When you wedge it, it spins it up and it gets them kind of flat. And then when you slap it down and when you get it centered and situated, it also tells that clay and gets that clay kind of flat. So I've wedged up this piece. It's a little too much clay, but it's better to start off with too much when you put your floor. So I've wedged it. I do kind of a conch style wedging instead of the monkey head wedging. I've got it situated and set up. I am not going to put it on this side and slap it down. There's air bubbles in there. What I will do is round this just a little bit. I like to slap my large clay, like you don't have to do this with your small pots, but if you're doing a large bowl or a platter, I like to slap it down on the point so that that tells that clay to compress at the base, because my base is going to be about an inch thick. And if you don't slap that down, you can't ever get down to get those clay particles flat on the side of the back. Up here you can, but you can still develop an S-trap. So when you think about it, I learned this from a professor at Texas A&M, Greg Reuter. Try to get it to pop down onto that, what would that be, like a Hershey's Kiss kind of point, so that you flatten it out. Okay, I use a Brent CXC because I can take the splash pan that's on the bottom that covers everything off, and I can get to the belt. I can take the belt off, whoa, as I almost break something, and turn this into a banding wheel. Or I can go back on, which usually I have to sit on the ground. Come here. Get it back on, and then you can just roll it like you're trying to get your chain back on your bicycle, and then we're set up, and we can get this kind of spinning. So when I'm making, I do coil with it off like a banding wheel, then I put it back on, and then I throw with ribs. I'll explain that in a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this going really slow, even slower than that if I can get it. And I'm going to start just kind of getting this tree centered. In Thailand, the way they do this, they've got a tree stump with a hole in it and a tree stump with like a spindle in it. And they put the tree stump on the hole like that, and then somebody sits there and turns it for the master that's making the large pots. I'm only making one at a time. They do 10 to 15 at a time. Jeez. And they do that. I speed mine up with a weed burner, and I dry my pot out. They do that so that they can start here, do the next one, next one, next one. By the time they get done with 15, number one's dry, and I'm going to do mine in sections. So in Thailand, if we were working with somebody, I would have a worker that would be sitting here turning this as you're tearing this out. This also compresses your clay. and gets it kind of set up. If you notice, I'm doing this in tiny steps, just like Amanda was talking about. I'm not trying to force this flat. If you try to force it flat, you're going to get some really undulating kind of undulating slab. Once I get it a little bit out, I'll start working slowly out on the piece, and then I'll go back in, and then I'll work slowly out, go back in, so forth and so on. So this is kind of the boring part. Do you have anything you want to start talking about? I'll be loud. You have to talk loud.
Use a pencil. It's going to give you a much better line. Knitting needle, so wonderful. So I think what do y'all want me to use? Pencil? They can do a pencil. So I have all kinds of little drawings that I do, and so I just keep them in this thing and I reuse them. I do multiples, and I guess that's part of my printmaking, but that's a tile thing too. Multiples. I'm going to find something in here to etch that might be easy for y'all to see or whatever. I do a lot of food imagery. I love food imagery. And I'll talk about that a little bit more tomorrow at the talk, but I do love food stuff. So I've got all kinds of little food drawings. So I think I'll do a hamburger.
Before you get going,
yeah.
I'm going to just kind of keep going real quick.
Yeah.
They use bamboo. You can pop out your larger pieces if you don't want to ruin your hands or your elbow, which I'm dealing with a problem with my elbow, but I'm very tactile, so that's why I was slapping the clay. I found that a roller works really, really well. So I've got this kind of situated. It's spinning nice and slow. It's still undulating, so we want to make this kind of flat. We're going to cut it on the center, but I'm going to go ahead and start compressing this down. It's kind of like her screeding her pieces. But while this is spinning, I can just kind of roll, and I'm doing it very lightly. And I'll just keep doing this for a good 60 times or so, and it'll get it nice and kind of flat. You can see that there's still some air bubbles. You can see that there's some weird spots where my thumb is hit, but this will flatten it out. Go.
Okay. So I have a little drawing. The more you use it, the more fun it gets because it will leave an impression. Because as you're, like right now, I'm going to like trace the design. I'm going to set it on top of the tile and trace it on there so it'll leave. And I'm not like gouging down in there because you'll tear your paper or whatever. But you're kind of just putting a little impression into the clay. And then after you use a drawing a few times, the paper gets the design kind of like etched into it. So it almost will transfer even just by itself the more you use it. So this one probably would have used it a lot. So I'm just tracing over it, pencil works great. And you can see, I don't know, you can see the impression.
Yeah.
So it gives you a nice good, like,
But you rolled it back and forth?
nice good starting point.
I'm getting the same pressure this way. If I pull back, I'm going to do a different kind of pressure. So I want it
Uneven?
to be the same all the way through. Plus, if I roll this way and then roll back, do you see how quickly that
Yeah, you go
that's
back.
moving?
Yeah.
This way, it's not moving very much.
And then, yeah, then I'll etch. I always etch on a banding tool. That way I can turn it with my tool. So don't have a bending wheel, just have your piece on a piece of paper and just turn with, if you can, turn with your line making.
Don't waste money on a crappy little banding wheel. Spend the $60 and get a Shimpo banding wheel.
If you're serious about it, this is,
You need the weight, you need the durability. That's just my thing. I'm
he's getting paid.
really a cheapskate, but when it comes to the things that I'm working with and I'm using, I gotta have the best. I'm not gonna screw around with anything else, right? It's just gonna save you time, make you feel better about your work. If you have a clean, nice space where you love your tools and everything's working correctly, you're happy. So I'm not worried about my edge. I'm not worried that it's kind of jacked up and weird. I'm just trying to keep this flat. I'm gonna cut it on center. They use bamboo strips. I didn't bring mine because I didn't want it to break, but they will put a really thin strip pole and they'll put it on their shoulder and they'll use their shoulder and their body and they'll go in and crank down to cut this on center. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to compress again while the wheel is moving relatively fast, and I'm going to do it with one of my favorite store-bought ribs, which I don't buy a lot of ribs. Where'd you go? Somebody's hiding. There you are. He's a little shy, or she's a little shy. Mud Tools, love their ribs. You can go crazy and get the blue and the green and the red. I really just use the yellow and the red a lot. And I use this shape for making my big pots. I love the little ones for making small pots. And I'll get this slightly wet. If you're throwing a lot, don't use little sponges. Use big sponges. You can squeeze them better. Little sponge, you're squeezing too tight. Carpal tunnel. Efficiency. You've got to keep your body efficient also. You don't want to lose what is going on in your elbows, in your wrists, in your hands. So I'm going to get this slightly wet. Do you see how it really isn't raising and lowering very much? There's a little bit of rise. That could be in my homemade bat. That could be the fact that we're just doing a demo and I'm talking while I'm working and not having just an intimate conversation with the clay. We're all having an intimate conversation, so it's like I'm kind of showing off and the clay might be talking back to me. But what I'll do is I'll kind of go in and slowly compress into the center. Lewis Katz doesn't believe in compression. You aren't compressing anything. All you're doing is leveling out those particles. I don't know if that's true or not. I believe him because he's kind of a genius, but I'm just kind of going through the motions and getting this nice and flat. I can keep my hands stable and keep it from wiggling a lot as I get to the center. Then I'll go with my rib, and I'll flatten that out even more. You'll see it rise to the center just a little bit, and then I'll push it back down. So what did I do? 5 times of compression with the rib, and I'll do 3 times, with the sponge, and I'll do 3 times with this little rib. And then I'm going to cut this on center. You can do fake plates, fake platters, big bowls, however you want to do it. If you're having a problem centering 10 or 15 pounds for your platter, you could do this, cut it on center, throw the rim, and you're good to go. Right? You could do this, cut it on center, take a rib, push up underneath there, raise it up, fix the rim, and you're good. It may or may not work. You gotta develop your dance with that method, right? And you'll figure it out. I've got my pen tool. This is still my very first pen tool. I've rounded the end on the back so that I've got a nice blunt tip, because I too hate pen tools and scratching. It's too harsh of a line. Okay, but I do like using this to cut, so I don't have my big stick. When you dive down in to cut, you've got to be really stable, elbows next to your rib cage, body tight. You can't let this go this way or this way. You've got to do it at 3 o'clock if you're right-handed. If you're left-handed, do it at 9. But I go directly in. You don't want to go in at an angle too much, because that clay is going to ride on this and it's going to push your tool. Get your tool wet. I usually go with about a 10-inch base. If you go 8, it'll be nice and pretty. It'll be standing on its little high heels. But you'll also be able to push that high-heeled pot over really easily. And these are big pots. When they fall over, they go boom. It's like the 6'6" guy when he falls compared to me, 5'8" when I fall. Everybody runs when the big guy falls. Not so much when I fall. So I'm going to go in and slowly cut down to the back and slowly come out. Now that is cut on center. I will stop my wheel. I personally like to turn the wheel on and off, then move in the pedal. Slice through there. Pull that out, and that's going to be my first set of coils. Good.
Alright, well, I'm just sketching. I'm using the pencil here. I have found that, we're all trying to get a nice clean line. Maybe you want scrabbly, that's okay, blue line. What I found that helps is, of course, it's also tool, and then also kind of holding it down, almost like as close to the blade as you can. And being at that angle helps a lot. And I think it's because if you're up here, you're striking through. But if you're down here, you're kind of just pulling through with it. I don't know how to explain that, but I'm always kind of coming towards me, and I use the wheel a lot, or the banding wheel a lot to get me in the direction that I'm always pulling towards me. I'm kind of pushing down into the clay and pulling. And that helps. There's always, you're never going to get it to not have some kind of scrapping. But this gets a pretty smooth line. We usually go back later. We can honestly, because I don't have it all done in etching yet. A little bit. But you'll notice it flicks to all burrs and stuff.
Bits of clay for my coils. That's today. Maker's hands, 6'5", larger maker hands, larger coils. Okay? You need to figure out the size and the weight of your coil that you want to use. I'm doing a time method where you make lots of little coils and then you wrap your piece. If you've seen somebody make a big pot, like Korean onggae pots or the Chinese, some people will have a huge coil of clay that they use to wrap around their pot. I prefer to use the smaller ones. It's a little more work, but I have a little more finesse with it. And also that's how I was taught. So I'll roll it out and I get it to about, I don't know, the new tamales that come from H-E-B and stuff are way too big if you ask me, but that's about an H-E-B tamale or a nice sausage, a brat, about that size. Toilet paper tube, however you think about it. I've already rolled some, but I always like to use the clay that I cut off of this piece because it's the same wetness. That's been done earlier, or I might take a break and it's wrapped up in there. Clay develops and dries at different rates. It develops skins and stuff. I want the clay that's going to be attached to this section to be the same clay. So I'll do a few little coils out of that bit, and I try to keep them separated and put them up there so that I know which ones I'm going with. Who wants to make a pinch pot or play with clay? Who's fidgety? Bad toss, good catch. This clay, like I said, has a bunch of red art and a bunch of Newman's clay in it. You can feel the grog, but I like colored clay. That pristine porcelain crap is kind of boring. I just got back from Jean de Jeune. It's still kind of boring to me. It's beautiful. It's like a really beautiful gesso canvas that you can do all your pretty colors, but I love brown. Doo-doo brown and patina on rocks and blacks and earth tones. I do love the colors. I'm just kind of making a joke. But in regards to the big pots, since I can't dip them in a glaze bucket, and I don't like brushing glaze on, ain't nobody got time for that. I'll spray my stuff with some slips and then just let the kiln do the action. I want to see that process. I want to be able to read those flames on the pieces, and the more ingredients and the kind of the darker your clay body is, the better you're going to be able to read what's going on. I want to be able to see the grog in the piece. You can see some of these. I throw chicken grit into my clay. I'll throw Granite, decomposed granite that I collected in Montana into the clay. You know, whatever I can get in there that'll tell a little bit more of a story on that clay body.
Yeah,
So-
atmospherically, you need an iron content.
Yeah,
Right.
or it's not going to read.
Right. Yeah.
I mean-
no compression thing with cats. That's absurd. Like, look what you're doing now. Every move you make.
But he doesn't believe in the compression. You are just getting those particles to
Aligned magically.
Yes.
That-
He's
no,
very,
that's
he's all about
complete-
semantics.
Yeah. Right. So in your centrifugal force or acentrifugal force, it's the alignment of the particles. It has nothing to do with the pressure of your hand. Yes.
So forth and so on.
Wow. Yikes.
All right, so I've got my coils kind of set up. That's going to be the first set that's going to go in there. This is on center. I'll spin it up again for you guys to see, right? It's on center. I've got a little bit of a rise. I'm going to be okay with that. When you guys were taught to start throwing, Ceramics 1, have y'all gotten into throwing yet? You sat at the wheel? Right? Okay. You have to learn that dogma of getting it centered. After you've learned that dogma, you can break the rules a little bit. Your hands will start to have this muscle memory. You'll get it centered. You'll see people that just go in, they'll talk to you, they have it centered, and then they start throwing. If you probably stopped the wheel and you came over and touched it, it's probably got their own little uncentered bit. You've got to learn how to center and then learn how to make it centered if you don't want to spend time getting it perfect. It doesn't have to be exact. You have to be able to kind of flow. You've seen some people that throw that are like, when they're throwing. They're following their weird stuff. I can't do that. I get a little vertigo. It makes me kind of dizzy. I like to stay kind of solid. At least I feel like I do. But there's a little bit of wiggle in here. I'm going to be able to work with it. I'm making this large pot that I'm going to keep cutting off sections, and it's going to keep growing, and there'll be spots that'll wiggle and jiggle a little bit, and then they'll come together. The pot isn't going to, unless you're real fancy, going to be spinning constantly. It's going to be sitting. So it can be a little schwepped and a little off. At least in my world, it can. I'm going to take my rib. I'm sorry I'm talking too much. You're still working. I'm going to take my rib, and I'm going to do what Amanda did and align or compress the edge, and also push that up just a little bit. Do you see how it's got a little bit of a curve? Get that going. Then I'll go in. Where did I sit that pin tool? I'll be losing my tools all day today. Are you in the bucket? There you are. And I will, this is the only time that I score my pieces. Every time I put a new section on, I'll do some scoring. Instead of using my rib tool, I'll go in with the pin tool on this section because I really want this to connect and tie in together. I'll go in with the Sharpie end, and then I'll go in with the blunty end and kind of get this all ratchet and ready to go for the coils that are going to go in. Then I will turn the fill off, turn my pedal off, and you should do this always. If you're going to take the belt off, make sure your hands are dry and you're not putting any clay on the bottom. If you put clay on that rubber belt onto the metal, it'll slip. It'll work, and then it'll slip in one section when you're trying to thread. So clean hands, dry hands, take that off. Take your coil. They need to be, they don't have to be the same length, but they need to be as close to the same size as possible in regards to girth. Make a little thumbprint on the side so that I've got a spot that can attach, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to start coiling the piece around here. I slightly turn my wrist, but most of the action is coming from pulling a trigger. When you guys, if you decide to start doing large coils, you're really going to be trying to do this, and that's just overworking the clay. It's more of a trigger kind of pull. I'll start a little bit on the inside down here, and I'll do my first round where I'm not really rising up, and then I'll slowly move to the rise up. This has to be kind of thick in the beginning because I'm going to hit it with ribs and pull it. So, go in. It's really important that you try to do the same pull all the way through. Do you see that this is a little bit thinner and this is a little bit thicker? Again, we're on the bottom. I know how to play with it, but when you first start, you want to try to be as precise as possible. And it's really important that you keep this outside hand, my left hand, here, stationary. So I'm always locking it on my thigh, and I'm going to slowly move up. When the pot gets here, I can't do that anymore, so I got to get a taller chair and a taller chair. And if I could do a Jun Kaneko piece, I'd get a ladder. It'd be sitting on the ladder as I go up.
It's cinder blocks.
Cinder blocks is what he uses?
Yeah, well, he hasn't built in 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, he cracked his head open.
Falling off those cinder blocks?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, so the whole back of the skull is flat.
Oh, wow.
Boom. Right. Yeah.
It's got to be in his 70s, 75, 76.
Oh, yeah, but he'll never die. His mom was still alive. So, yeah,
He's
he'll-
Japanese.
Yeah. From Nagoya. Yeah, no, he'll be alive forever. But yeah, I'm worried about you too, because with big pots, you can only, eventually you kind of age out. Right?
Yep.
Or
You age out with any
Yeah.
sport.
Right.
That's why I'm going to do little things. But if you see, I saw Ron Myers 2 years ago do a demo, and he's making his nice kind of large pieces and wedging on the floor at 82.
Yeah.
I got to quit smoking cigarettes.
Yeah. Same disease.
I got to quit drinking so much beer, quit using so much salt.
Well, yeah, there's current records though, like, yeah.
But I'm not going to Volcus out. I don't need an 8-ball and a bottle of whiskey for my demos at all. I just need a bubble water and Amanda right here for me. Sorry, talking 70s art talk. So what I'm doing is I'm going to slowly keep rolling this up. When I run out of these, I'm going to bust into these, and I usually get it to about this size. I can throw this pot, this part of the pot, but I like to work from the bottom up, doing the same thing throughout. So I'm not going to throw. Daniel has moved to throwing his pieces. For me, no. I don't want to do that yet. Maybe I'll eventually get into that form, but I like to start the pot the same way I'm going to finish the pot, through coils.
So what I didn't show y'all yet is, so edges, and I'll probably do this again later too. So I have my thing, pretend this is edge, like this one. I usually take my X-Acto again, and what I'll do is I'll cut a small bevel around the edge. So I'm taking it at an angle, and I'm cutting off the smallest little sliver of that corner, which will take away that really harsh edge. Now, if you want that, or, you don't have to do this bevel, I do this bevel, and then I go back with my finger, smooth it out, gives you a nice, smooth edge if you want it. If you don't want to do the bevel, and you want to just use your original edge, I would say just, go back and forth